Hello, hello, and welcome to the Wealth Wisdom channel, our weekly YouTube interview with an amazing person. This week we've got Bri Salsman. She is the founder of Life by Design or Live Life by Design. I'll let her explain it and tell you all about it. I'm super excited for the conversation we're going to have today. If you would give us a thumbs up, let us know you're listening. The comments are open. You can jump in there as well. Bri, I know your bio and everything is below in the description, but give the folks at home a little bit of a little bit more about who you are, where you're coming from, and thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Amanda. I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this. I know we've had it on our calendar for a little bit now. So I'm excited that the day has finally arrived. Yeah, I'm Brie. I am the founder of Life Live by Design. I'm a professional certified coach. And with the International Coaching Federation, and I work predominantly with women who are trying to get out of that gap, that place where they look backwards, and not that they're unhappy with it necessarily or they regret it or anything. Maybe that's the case, but they just don't want to continue on that path anymore. And then they look forward and either it's totally muddy and unclear, or it's very clear, but they just don't know how to get there. And so they're kind of in this gap in between the two. And I work with them to help them get out of that space. So I started my practice 3.5 years ago now, and in early 2019. And after having a long career in education, and it really stemmed from my own personal experience. I just ran myself into the ground with my career, did not feel appreciated, valued, no matter how many different avenues I tried to go, and also wasn't really accomplishing my financial goals and didn't really see a path for that in that career of education. And so started thinking, like, what else is out there? It was a really big time of exploration for me because I never thought that I would ever leave education. I never thought that I just was like, this is what I've chosen. I enjoy it, and this is what I'm going to do. But when I started to realize that this is not getting me to my personal goals, that's when I started thinking about other possibilities. So.
Yeah, kudos. There's so many folks that they'll realize the trajectory they're on is not going to actually get them where they want to go, what's really going to bring them joy and satisfaction in life and help them be who they're meant to be, but they just stay there and they don't try to see like, well, what could get me there? What might be a different path? They think this is the path I chose. I got to stay there. So awesome that you decided to switch paths. Let's go a little bit back in the story before we go forward in the story and hear kind of what that moving out of the gap looks like. What when you think back to like your childhood, what are some of like those earliest memories about money or about what your future could look like that really have shaped and formed who you've become and gave you the courage when it came to it to make those decisions for your own future?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So many messages, and most of them I didn't realize were there until I was an adult. And I think that's probably similar for a lot of people. You just kind of absorb things and then you realize what it means later on. So my parents got divorced when I was 6 years old, and we had two very different living experiences in the house in each household. For my dad, he had his own company and it was growing, and he was working really, really hard to give himself a better life than his parents. And it's not that he had a bad life growing up, but I think that's something everyone strives for, is a better life than the previous generation.
Yeah.
On my mom's side, she also is working, and unlike my dad, she did not finish college, and so that limited the job opportunities. She also wasn't working when they were married, and so when she went into the workforce, it really was an entry level position, and now she's on her own supporting 2 children. And there were days where my older sister and I came home from school and the lights wouldn't come on. And I'm so young that I don't really think, oh, that's weird, the lights don't come on, whatever, I'm still going to go outside and play. So
Mhm.
it wasn't until later on that I realized, down to like the neighborhoods that they lived in, that they're in very different socioeconomic status, in terms of their income. And so certainly, I kind of acquired pieces of both into where I am now, which is, from my mom, I got that, like, you just don't know. And so you need to make sure you hold on and be very careful and frugal, not necessarily cheap, but frugal with your money, and plan very well. And then from my dad's side, I got that like investment perspective of how do you make your money grow. And so it's interesting because there's pros and cons to that combination. In some
Yeah.
areas of my life, it served me really well. In other areas, I'm still figuring out and navigating what that means for me as an adult.
Yeah. And I feel like regardless of people's background, there's that how do you find your right mix of safety and risk of, growing your money or making sure that it stays with you. And everybody kind of finds their unique mix. And the economists try to tell us rules of thumb that we might use. But it sounds like that could have been an even more difficult journey for you since you were getting such extremes from different sides of your experience as a child. Tell me a little bit about what that looked like as you started getting into adulthood and your own career. How did you find your own path from there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thankfully, it wasn't long before my mom was able to gain some stability and get on solid foundation. So, that was a small window of time. So I feel really fortunate for that. So I got to see that progress from, how do you go from paycheck to paycheck to actually being able to plan for retirement and those kinds of things. And so, as I went into my adulthood for myself, I did go right into college from undergrad. I worked really, really, really hard to get scholarships and grants and things like that. And I was really fortunate to have the vast majority of my college paid for through scholarships and whatnot. I only had to take a very small amount of loans. And so that also meant that when I graduated, it wasn't very long at all before I had those loans paid off. And that really was because, the split between my mom and my dad. And, there's a little bit of game playing in that, right? When you have divorced parents, like I had the luxury of being able to use my mom's income on FAFSA in order to get the loans and kind of leave my dad's off and that kind of thing. And so I recognize, certainly there's privilege in that and being able to have those options for sure. And so, but then there's the piece of, the fear of debt in general. And so since then, I I never have more than one debt at a time, basically. So it's like if I'm buying a car, okay, the home gets put off until the car is paid off. If I'm, buying a home, then there's no other major purchases until the mortgage is paid off, things like that. And so I think there's this balance of, yes, I see the advantage of having assets for myself, that I've seen that that's been beneficial for my dad to have real estate and things like that. But also in my personal life and like spending money on myself, that's very much, comes from my mom, and that I don't really spend money on myself. I don't do luxurious things. I'm very, very frugal, even down to going to the grocery store. Like I'm at the point now where I'm very fortunate to have the income that, I don't have to create technically a budget for the grocery store for one person. It's just me. So it's whatever I get is going to fit in my budget, but I still buy all the off-brand stuff. And that's where that frugality shows up. Even though I don't have to, it's still there.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm like, why buy the name brand when I can buy the off brand and it's the same thing. They just put a different
Exactly.
name on it, right?
Sometimes even from the same manufacturer, they just
Right.
put it in a different box. It's
Yeah.
like, this is yeah.
Yep. And I mean, I think that's just being smart. I hate when people call it cheap. It's like, nope, it's just being, and if it's the same for me, if it's not changing my level of happiness, right, then good. Um, yeah. So great that that's kind of carried through with you while still maintaining some smart, side on growing your money at the same time. How has some of those, because I know a little bit of your story, share as much or as little as you feel comfortable. How has that helped you through like the thick and thin of life as you've had those ups and downs? How have those lessons carried you through that?
Yeah. Well, certainly I would say it's definitely helped way more than it has hurt for
Mhm.
sure. I think the areas where it maybe is a hurt, it's more of like a bump in the road than it is more of a hurt. And it's really around the psychological piece of money, and my own internal relationship with money. But in terms of like the practicality and the tangible way of spending money, saving money, investing money, all of that kind of stuff, it's definitely done nothing but help me in that respect. So, when one of the things that I've been able to do, even, as always being able to hold a full time benefited position within a company, whether it's education or now otherwise, um, I've always had access to health insurance. And so, even though that premium is, going up and up and up and up, in 2017, when I was diagnosed surprisingly with a brain tumor, it did mean that 100% of the procedure and everything was covered, and I didn't have to pay anything out of pocket. And I'm talking about $250,000 when that bill came. And let me tell you, Amanda, that explanation of benefits came in the mail, and I literally dropped on my kitchen floor and just was bawling because I was like,
Yeah.
this is more than my home. Like, I don't know
Right.
how I'm ever going to be able to pay this. And I think it was about 10 days to 2 weeks later that the insurance then caught up with that and like,
Mhm.
I had the notice of like, and this is how much you have to pay out of pocket. And I again like started crying again because I was just like, oh my God, I cannot believe this. Like, how is this possible? I feel really fortunate, and so certainly being in a position to work full time at a company that offers exceptional benefits allowed that for me, which then puts me in positions as well to take the money that I am making and purchase a home or things like that. So, I feel like with money, it's always I don't want to say a balancing act because it's not just two sides like a scale. I mean, it's kind of like one of those scales where you have like 6 or 7 different plates and they all and that's kind of what I feel like I've done is okay. So, right now I'm thinking about, I'm considering, you heard it first here. I'm considering a doctoral program. And so I'm like, okay, if that scale goes up in education, what are the other areas that need to go down in order to accommodate that? And like, so I guess in a sense it's a balancing act, but it's way more than just two things that I'm trying to balance. And so I'm always looking for how can I level up without necessarily having to take steps back in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that as like prioritizing that you're
Yeah,
saying, okay, this is my priority in life right now. How can I align my values and my money, what my money is doing around that priority? And whether
100%.
that's paying off a medical bill or going back into a doctoral program or whatever it might be, you're willing to make some short term sacrifices because you know what your priorities are. And they don't feel like sacrifices because they're helping you make that thing that is going to be super important to you happen. So I love that. That's a great way because too many people budget and stick to it when their priorities change. Like, no, your priorities change. You got to change things up. Go for it. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to stick to what you said before. That's what I hate most about budgeting is how it makes people feel so restricted when it shouldn't be. Um, okay, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox there.
No, no, no,
um,
no, I love it, I love it.
so yeah, so you got this diagnosis, you got treatment, things were happening. How did that change a little bit of like your career or your journey with money from there in terms of how, like, did you wanna keep those full-time with benefits kind of position? Did you see how, like, um, that yeah, what had I could imagine being a like, an entrepreneurial type myself, I'd wanna be like, "I wanna go do my own thing, but then also I need these health benefits. How do I wrestle with this?"
Yeah, I so after that, there was not a single area of my life that went unexamined. I
Mhm.
mean, I picked apart every single aspect from friendships, family, career, money. I mean, literally the whole pie got rebaked, remade.
Yeah.
And the career was part of that. And it was a big part of that, actually, because, I was working really long weeks. I was at that point in time, I was an administrator at a high school. I was a dean of students. And so, administrators don't get summers off. That's our opportunity to plan and get things in place for the next year. So, and then on top of that, very, very long weeks, even during the school year. And so, I just had this moment of, yes, I'm enjoying life and I get to travel and all of those kinds of things, but I don't want to count my vacation days. I don't I don't want to have my vacation days at the mercy of someone else saying yes or no, or just there's a just a conglomeration of things that went into it. And I decided that's it. I'm done.
Mm.
I had no idea what was next, but I knew what was before can't continue for lots of different reasons. And so lo and behold, I found myself in the gap. And my gap lasted about 3 years. It was a pretty big gap for me. But during that time, I really didn't care about the dollar amount anymore. I didn't care about whether I was putting money in retirement. I didn't care about because it was a point in time where I was like, I don't know if this is going to grow again. I was going back for regular. In short, they were able to get most of it, but not all of it. And so there was a period of time of like, we have to watch this and see if it's going to grow back. And so for that period of time, I was just like, you know what? I don't care. I'm literally throwing the playbook out the window. And I drained my savings. I did not cash in my retirement, but I stopped adding to my retirement. I did get a credit card, which I've never had before. And, I just was like, screw it. I'm ready to live. And so I did that for a little while and I made do. I scrapped together whatever I needed to do, but I was having so much fun.
Mm.
And so I kind of swung the pendulum the complete opposite direction, where before it was like work, 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 and have a little bit of play. And now it was like I'm playing all the time with just a little bit of work. And it was good because that's what allowed me to find the in between of like, okay, now how do I design a life for myself where I'm not, living to work or even working to live, but I'm working to play even,
Mm.
and so that's kind of where, I experienced the pendulum on the other end, and then I came up to breathe, so to speak, and was like, okay, now let's get real, because now I've got word from my doctor that this is looking good. It's looking like it's maintaining, and who knows when and ever it could, but I can't be living fully in play for the next 60 years, So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, let's get back down to it and just figure out like, what does the path look like forward for me? I know that it doesn't look like 80-hour weeks anymore. I know that it doesn't look like, answering to a supervisor or employer or things like that. But and then at that point, it was like the possibilities are endless, and so it was super exciting. And I took this perspective of curiosity and experimentation. I did things that I never thought that I would ever be doing,
Mm.
and even now I look back and I'm like, well, that was an interesting choice, but I learned a lot. And yeah, so
Yeah. Now, I know that experience has helped you be an expert at, being in the gap and finding our way to the other side of the gap. So, what it like, uh what are some of the, like, practical things that the folks at home could try to, kind of take steps to the other side of whatever gap they're in right now, where maybe they're like, "Yeah, I've been experimenting a little bit, but I can't seem to find my way out of this." What does that side of things look like?
Yeah. I like to, when I'm working with my clients, I like to break it down into 3 phases.
Okay.
And I really think this first phase, what I've seen is the phase that a lot of people just completely overlook. And that is you got to get real with yourself about the way things are right now.
Mm,
And sometimes people are so unhappy with the way things are right now that they're just like, whatever, just get me out of it. And they just want to do whatever it takes to get out of it. But the reality is, there's so much to learn about what's not working. And if you don't take that opportunity to explore and learn and identify that piece of it, then you might jump to the next thing, but then you're duplicating again. It's just showing up in a different way.
mm,
And so that first phase of like, no, like really digging into every aspect of your life, your relationships, your money, your career, your physical space, your home, all those things, and saying, okay, what's working about this? What's not working about this? Before you jump to the future and say, okay, now what do I want to create moving forward? That's that second phase of future focused, getting in touch with that future version of yourself, whether that's 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. Lots of times we want to think about like, oh, when, if I'm 30 years old, when I'm 50, or when I get to retirement, or things like that. And that's exciting. And you definitely need to plan for that. But sometimes that's so far off that it's hard to get the details fleshed out because it's not within reach. So I really suggest looking at either, somewhere in the 5 to 10 year range, because it stretches you far enough to get creative and beyond what's real right in front of you, but not
mm.
so far that it feels intangible. And then that third step is, okay, so you've got your 2 in posts. And the third piece really kind of reveals itself from there of like, what's the path between the two?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that because I like to think of it. I think maybe in a past life or something, I was a captain of a ship. And the idea of like you're in this harbor right here. You might feel a little safe or whatever, but like you're on a ship. You're not meant to just stay in a harbor. That's not the point. This port over here that you want to go to, you've got a destination, and to like chart the path of how you get there and avoid the hurricanes and the sharks and all the stuff in between. Is kind of part of the adventure, but then also you never know what's going to change. You have to be willing to adapt, like we were talking about earlier, right? Like priorities change, and you can't just stay the path. You got to sometimes make some changes there. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like so key on that connecting the two is that adaptability, because without a doubt, you can have the best laid plan, and there's always going to be things that show up that you just could not have anticipated. And not to get too like academic on you, but there is, what's called hope theory. And what we know is that the most hopeful people are people who are able to adapt, and they see multiple routes to get to the same goal. And so what's really fascinating is like, if you had asked me 10 years ago or 5 years ago, is where I'm sitting today where I thought I would be? The answer is no, definitely not. From the day-to-day stuff, no. But from the bigger picture, am I working from wherever I want to work, whenever I want to work, however long I want to work, and get to travel wherever I want to go for however long I want to be there? Absolutely. Now, there's lots of different ways to make that happen in the practical sense. And if I had gotten so caught into like this is the path to make this bigger picture happen, I can promise you I wouldn't be here. But because you're adaptable and flexible, and you just keep that bigger picture in mind, that's what gets you there.
I love that. I'm taking notes over here. Hope theory and multiple paths to get to the same goal is really what hope is all about.
Mhm.
And I was listening to somebody talk about hope on a podcast the other day. They were working with refugees, and think like these refugees would talk about, and I'm gonna totally paraphrase. They said it so much more beautifully, that like they had no option but hope, and they had to be like determined to keep their hope, and that was the path forward. And so I love that. I want to take what I was listening there, re-listen to it, and then go research this hope theory thing and like dig into that more. Cause I consider myself a hopeful person, and that really resonates with me. Like my life's meandered, it's adapted, it's been different things, but it's because I have a hope that um keeps me going and allows me to be a little more flexible and always have kind of that end goal in mind in
Mhm.
the meantime.
Absolutely.
I gotta go back to number 1, the investigating thing.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
I feel this tension that a lot of people have where they're like, "Do I just turn inward, do a little bit of
Mhm.
belly button gazing, think, feel, meditate, whatever that looks like, and move forward from there? Or do I go devour all the books, the podcasts, the courses, whatever, in order to find my way? Do I have to do all of the above? What would you say to that question?
Yeah. In true coach fashion, there's no right or wrong way. So if you are someone who gets a lot out of journaling and meditating and things like that, then absolutely do those things. I would also say if that's your default and the way that you've always done it, maybe experiment with some other things. Reach out to external sources as well and see what can come from it. The biggest thing in that is to be open. And the best piece of advice I have is whenever you get any information that is kind of expressing or bringing up resistance for you, rather than responding right away, say thank you for the feedback, and then take it with you and get really curious about what is this resistance about. And then the same thing on the flip side. If you're someone who's always looking externally for advice and feedback and insights, maybe challenge yourself to do a little bit of meditation or journaling. Or if you're like me, I like to do voice memos because my hand can't keep up with my brain, and it hurts so badly. So I just press record on my phone and just talk away. And then it's also kind of cool to hear yourself talk. I know some people are like, oh, I don't want to hear my own voice, but if you can get past that and really listen to yourself, it can be really powerful to hear yourself outside of your own head.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Great answer. And I like that also be open to both because there'll be
Mhm.
seasons in our lives where we need a little bit more of one or a little bit more of the other, or even days where we're like, today, like some days in the car, I'll be like, I need to listen to some podcasts. I need fed a little bit. And other days I'm like, nope, some silence in the car so I can think is great too.
Yep.
So I love that openness and kind of maybe like from internally saying, what do I need right now? What would be most
Mhm.
beneficial? I like that.
Yep.
Okay. Well, so I love this. Intentionality is a huge word for me. And when I saw the name of your company, Life Lived by Design, I think I got it right that time. That just spoke intentionality to me. So I love that you're putting more of that out into the world. And it's lifelivedbydesign.com.
It is,
Okay,
yes. Yep.
great. So folks, go check out Brie. Subscribe. You've got some stuff there. We can subscribe to your newsletter, your blog there, and keep in touch. And what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely my website is the main place. I'm going to be totally honest. While I have social media accounts, I'm not a social media person. So the best
Amen. Whoop, whoop.
way, truly the best way is just shoot me an email. It's Brie@lifelivedbydesign.com. And I actually put together a really special offer for your listeners. They can get my workbook. It's at lifelivedbydesign.com/podcast. And they can get it for a special rate. Normally it's $35 and it's at this point $22 for you all. So definitely check that out. And it will take you through that process. You know, one of my core values as a coach in my business is accessibility. And I know coaching is financially unattainable for a lot of people. And so that's where my workbook came from, is like, at least this can be a starting point for you. And it really is a workbook. It's get your pen, write in it, and it's pretty hefty. I'm not going to lie. So yeah, I'm happy to offer that to your listeners.
Cool. I put the link there on the screen so folks can get it. And I'm looking at the website now, the Examined Life Workbook. I love that. They say the unexamined life is not worth living. Some philosopher said that. We had mugs we created in college as a fundraiser. The uncaffeinated life is not worth living. So it sounds like a workbook with a cup of coffee right next to it. The way to go.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's amazing.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Oh, and I had to throw the coffee joke in there because that's actually where Brie and I first met, was
Mhm.
at the coffee shop in the South Loop in Chicago. So if you're in
Yeah.
that area, go check out Overflow Coffee and you'll
Yes.
connect with Brie and I there in spirit.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brie. And folks, give us still a thumbs up. The comments are open, or you can reach Brie at lifelivedbydesign.com. And we'll talk to you again next week, same place, about same time. And be sure you subscribe so you get those notifications.